had to pause the video for a second. Now, what I was explaining is Muslims say that God does not enter into his creation, but as I was explaining, that makes no sense because you can't separate the two. You can't have consciousness existing you can't have creation existing absent of consciousness. And I know this kind of deep. It's like this. Everything, the outside is an illusion. Because like I was explaining to them, we live inside of our senses. Everything you see is processed inside of your brain. Everything you touch, hear, see, smell, all of your five senses are processed via your brain. The images that you see before you right now, the sounds that you see before you right now, it's all processed via your brain. So you actually live within your brain. So the outside world is actually an illusion. So now I'm about to show them, as you're about to see, a verse in the Bible that backs up what I'm saying to you right now. And here it goes.
Back up what I'm saying. It says in the book of Acts 17:28.
Now I'm about to read Acts 17:28 to them to quantify my statements.
In the Bible to back up what I'm saying. It says in the book of Acts 17:28, for in him we live, move, and have our being, as certain also of your own poets have said, for we are also his offspring. So it proves what I'm saying. So when Islam came along, it brought this teaching that goes against logic. You cannot have creation existing outside of the consciousness of the creator. It can't exist because it has to exist within a consciousness. To say it doesn't exist within a consciousness makes no sense. So when Muslims say that we have the same God, that in itself kills all of that. You can't have a God that exists outside of creation because creation comes from the consciousness. You can't separate the two. That's it. You can't separate the two. So that's the biggest gripe. So when you come along with this new form of God that don't make sense, that's confusion.
Okay, let's try to.
God is not the author of confusion.
We got you. And
now watch, he said we got you, and watch he try to get away from what I stated because he knows it's impossible to refute what I said. It's impossible.
I appreciate it. Yes. No, I definitely understand where you are drawing your lines and why you understand it that way. That would be no problem to speak about. And at this point, I really don't have to mention what the answer is now because I just want to show you some brotherly love. I'm not going to debate with you about it now, but I appreciate that answer. So that's a step forward. I appreciate it.
You're not going to respond to what I said? You're not going to
I thought that's what we would eventually. I thought that you were defining what the debate is.
Well, that's what
in
I'm
the
asking
future.
You. No. I'm talking about now.
He's not telling you.
I'm asking you right now, Kareem. I want you to demonstrate.
No problem. We can talk about it a little bit, I guess, now.
It's up to Kareem, but he was not asking you to debate tonight. That's not what he was asking. Okay? He's asking you to set up an official debate where you have a regulated time to speak or yell. You probably yell. But you have your designated time to speak, and he has his designated time to speak about a particular topic. So he thought you were clarifying, or making a point about the topic in general. He's not trying to debate you tonight.
But no. I mean, if you want to have a pre-debate discussion, would be fine. But yeah, let's set up something that way.
Actually, what I was speaking about, the consciousness, if you were paying attention, you will see that part of what I was saying was actually addressed to the man with the headphones. he said he gave me 4 options of what to debate about. Then I laid down my premise. That's all I was doing. And Kareem saw that it was a very strong point I made. So, of course, he shied away from it. We can all see through it. We already know what time it is. So they not fooling nobody over here.
We can become used to each other, have something nice, and have fun when
I want to do a pre-debate right now.
Yeah.
I want you to answer my question.
Absolutely.
I want you to show me and your audience.
And as you see, I called their bluff. Kareem said, okay, we can do a pre-debate. I said, okay, I want to do a pre-debate right now. I'm not afraid of them. They know I don't back down.
How does it make sense to say you can separate creation from the consciousness? I want you to prove that in a logical. Give an example, like I gave an example and backed it up with a verse. Show me an example how you can make sense of creation existing without consciousness to exist within. I want you to show me that. Show me.
Yeah, before I show you, because I'm not going to show you, I'm only going to explain why I see Islam as logical. And then if anyone wants to accept it, that's fine. If not, I'm just explaining what. And that's the difference. I'm not trying to show you. I'm just trying to explain why I see. But let me continue.
Since you can't do it. All right, okay. Since you can't do it, how about the dude with the headphones? I want him to answer it. Show me how creation can exist without being inside of consciousness. Show me how creation can exist without being inside of a consciousness to exist within. Show me. Make that make sense.
It seems a bit like you're running from me answering it because you just said if I'm afraid to, and I'm not sure if the audience caught that because I'm in the middle of answering it. You said you're afraid. What?
Answer the question. Show me how consciousness, how creation can exist only.
Okay. Right. So you're asking me a question concerning God. You're saying, show me how God can do your concept. Now, from the very beginning, we both have a concept of a God who literally can do anything. So now you're asking me to tell you how God can do how you perceive God, and I can answer you on the very most basic of levels that my God can do anything, meaning he can create a creation and control that creation without being inside of the creation. Why can he do that?
Does that make any sense, people? He is basically saying that creation can exist outside of the consciousness of the creator. So by him saying that, he is saying that creation can be a God existing in and of itself within its own consciousness, absent of having to exist within the consciousness of the creator. He just committed shirk. That's why I said and I read Acts 17:28, which says that we live and move and have our being within God. Nothing can exist outside of the creation, outside of the consciousness of the creator. You can even hear how Kareem was trying to explain that it was making absolutely no sense. Then he said, my God can do anything. He's not even making sense. But as you see, Muslims will pick their cherries. Something nonsensical like saying that God does not enter his creation, even though creation lives inside of God and all creation comes from the consciousness of God. He will say that his God can do everything and his God don't have to enter into his creation. So the question to Kareem is this: when Allah is looking upon creation, where is creation located? Where is it being processed? It's being processed where? Is it within his consciousness or is it outside of his consciousness? How does that make sense? Can creation in Islam exist by itself without Allah being conscious of it? That means creation would have a mind of its own. So can Allah turn his back and not be conscious of creation and creation still exists within its own consciousness? That don't make sense. So in order for him to make it make sense, he has to say his God can do everything, his God can do anything. But when Muslims ridicule the Trinity, what do they say? They say it doesn't make sense. How can you have 3 in 1? Make that make sense to me. But the make it make sense to me argument, he throws it out of the window when I bring up a logical point that creation cannot exist outside of consciousness. At this time, he turns away from things having to make sense. And his defense is it doesn't have to make sense when it comes to his God. But when it comes to the Trinity, they want us to make it make sense to them. But when it comes to him trying to explain how can Allah be outside of creation, his defense is it doesn't have to make sense. Do y'all see what I'm saying? So these Muslims are hypocritical, they inconsistent, and they pick cherries. He can't explain how can creation exist outside of the consciousness of the creator. So his defense was it don't have to make sense. But if a Christian would say to a Muslim that the Trinity don't have to make sense for it to make sense and for us to believe in it, Kareem would reject it. But he's doing the very thing when it comes to explaining how can God exist outside of creation when creation needs God in order to exist, because creation is rooted and came forth from the consciousness of the creator. There's no way to explain around that. And even when we explain the Trinity to them and show them examples in nature of things that operate like a Trinity, they still reject it. But here goes Kareem not being able to show me an example, but yet he expects us to accept that God can be outside of his consciousness, even though creation, but yet he wants us to accept that God can be outside of his creation, even though creation springs forth from the consciousness of the creator. So he just shot himself in the foot.
That because back to our agreed upon qaida, or our principle, is God can do anything. So that's a very basic answer. Please, elaborate on how that's not acceptable for you.
You know what the irony is? Even his own Bible goes against him when it says, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay, okay. Even his own Bible goes against him when it says in the book of Genesis, chapter 11, that God, allegedly, his God, is away from his creation, and he had to go down close to his creation to see what they are doing. You know, the Tower of Babel, that's exactly what it's saying. It's insulting God in the most heinous, the worst ways possible. By the way, that's one of the worst chapters of the Bible, one of the worst, if not the worst. And it says that God allegedly had to go down and see what they were doing because he was outside of his creation.
He's lying. He's lying. And I challenge that Muslim who just lied to show us a verse in the Bible that says that God is outside of his creation. That's a lie. When we just read Acts 17:28, for in him we live and move and have our being. We just read 1728. So the Muslim who just spoke, he lied. And furthermore, there is a hadith that says that Allah comes down to the lowest heavens. He comes down to the lowest heavens to hear the prayers of the Muslims. And that's a whole problem in itself that we can get into at another time, because the earth, if that's the case, it says that Allah comes down during the third of the night to hear the prayers of the Muslims. But the earth has time zones. So that means the third of the night is always a third of the night on the earth. So that means Allah would always be at the lowest of the heavens, because it's always a third of the night somewhere on the earth, because the earth has time zones. So actually, he just got himself busted. He didn't get me busted, because nowhere in the Bible does it say that Yahweh is outside of his creation. It actually says, for in him we live, move, and have our being. They was just dumbfounded, simple as that.
So basically, your Bible refutes you. There you go.
What is he laughing at? He lied. He lied, but he's laughing. Everybody can see that you lied. I mean, you laughing at yourself. You didn't make a point.
Case closed.
No, case closed on you. You have to quantify your statement. That's not a case closed.
Becky Karim, would you like to say something about that?
Well, there's just so much wrong with what he's saying. I'm baffled at where to start. Mm-hmm. He's saying to us pretty much, since a human being's consciousness relates to the world that we live in like this, then it has to be that way with God. These are simple things that a Muslim child would reject. These are things that are inconceivable to our minds. I've never even thought of such a thing, because it's so illogical when it comes to Islamic theology. That's how I know you haven't done enough studying yet, brother. Really, and just, please answer my question. How is it that a God that can do anything is somehow hindered from what you are saying right now? Tell me why that is hindering him. What is hindering him? And please explain that, in your opinion, why your God would be hindered from doing such a thing. Please explain.
And I'm not kidding either.
So we have our answer. We've totally stumped him at this point. And let's continue.
All right. This is the response. Now, first of all, the Bible does not say God does not enter his creation. I read from Acts 17:28, where it says, for in him we live and move and have our being. So we have our being inside of God. Now, what you said, Kareem, was that your God can do anything and that he is controlling his creation and separated from his creation. But that does not make sense, because he is controlling his creation from where? What is the center point of origin from everything that exists? The center point of origin for everything that exists is the consciousness of the creator. So that means he is controlling his creation from his center point, which is his consciousness. You cannot separate the two.
Show me the term center point of consciousness in the Bible.
Okay, I just read it.
No, show me the term center point. These are very specific terms that you're building a huge case about. You are really the most.
You see how this dude is not even making sense? I said center point to relate to Acts 17:28 and to relate to what I was saying. Why does that center point has to be in the Bible? The Bible is not going to say center point, but it explains that everything is inside of God, as it does in Acts 17:28, and as plain common sense and logic shows that creation cannot exist outside of the consciousness of the creator, because of the simple fact that the consciousness of the creator is the soil where creation springs from. Just like in Islam, they say Allah just says be, and whatever is comes forth. But where did it come from? Allah had to say be from where? It came from where? Within him. So it was already in him. So how can something that comes from God not be, how can something that comes from God not be accessible to God? How can God be outside of the very thing that came from inside of him, and that very thing that came from inside of him cannot exist without God existing? So that proves that creation cannot exist without the consciousness of God, because God has to exist in order for creation to exist, because God is the soil for all creation to exist. It's the foundation of all, like, for all creation. So when Muslims say that God cannot enter into his creation, it makes absolutely no sense. So what Kareem was saying doesn't add up to what God is. God is omnipresent. Part of omnipresence means being everywhere at once. How can God be omnipresent but separated from creation? The attributes of God is omnipresence, which means being everywhere at once, omniscience, which means being all-knowing, and omnipotent, which means being all-powerful. Those three things is the ingredients of what makes something God. Omnipresence, omniscience, and omnipotent. So how can God be omnipresent if he is not present within his creation? None of them make sense. But this is the absurdity you have to believe in order to be a Muslim. We're just showing you the crazy, ridiculous way that Muslims think. None of this Islam crap garbage makes sense.
Knowledgeable person about God that I've ever met to explain these mystifying things to us at this moment. But please explain your proof and show us these types of terminology.
Okay, I'm gonna break down.
Sorry, what was the reference again? What was the reference again?
Acts 17:28.
Acts 17:28. Acts 17:28. Which version of the Bible would you like?
King James Version. King James Bible.
King James.
Yeah, King James Bible.
Okay.
Acts
Okay.
17:28. Hey, if you want to get funny, if you want to get funny about it,
Which one of the King James? I have 5 different versions.
All right, listen. Since you want to get funny about it, I got a hadith up right now where your prophet told Allah that his people wouldn't be able to get it in one dialect, and he kept disobeying Allah, and he asked for forgiveness, and Allah had to keep telling him over and over. So since you want to get funny, your prophet was sinning against
I'm not being funny. I have 5 different versions.
So since he wanted to divert and brought up 5 different versions of the KJV, because Muslims always do this, and it's so easy to see. This is the thing. When Muslims start bringing up that thing about the Bible is corrupted, don't try to defend to them that the Bible is not corrupted. The only thing you have to do is go to the Quran and see what the Quran says about the Bible. Last I checked, Allah sent down the gospel, the Injil, the Torah to us, to the Christians. So last I checked, the Quran calls the Christians the people of the book. So if we didn't have the book, then why would we be called the people of the book? Last time I checked, Islam is only 1,400 years old. Last time I checked, we still have the same access to the same scriptures in Torah and Injil that Christians had in the 7th century. Last time I checked, the Quran says that Muhammad was supposed to confirm the gospel that was in between his hands. So he actually had access to the 7th century writings that we have access to today. So all of this gibberish that they are saying is so easy to shoot down. And I challenge him to debate me on whether or not the Bible is corrupted. And that's why I brought up the hadith where his own prophet disobeyed Allah. His own prophet disobeyed Allah. And we're going to show you where I'm going to get Kareem busted and Kenny Bomer's entire panel busted on the very point that I'm telling you about right now.
Of the King James, which one would you like? The first, the original, the second, the third, the fourth, or the last one, which is the New King James? Which one of the five?
I'm sure the audience knows, as I do, there is no types of terms that he's using. He's making that up and giving a understanding to those verses that are not.
Let me be right back with my five version.
I'm making something up, people, but I read to you Acts 17:28. For in him we live, move, and have our being. But I'm making it up, like Kareem said. That guy's a fool.
Of the King James, 5.
And also, let me go ahead and elaborate more on what I find problematic in what he says. So he is claiming that God is basically, our whole lives are playing out inside of God's consciousness. Is that true, brother Jacob? Everything that's happening in reality is actually happening in God's consciousness. That true? I'm assuming that's what he's saying. And if he's saying that, and he believes God entered, then God is only entering his own consciousness, and he's not actually entering into creation. And if you want to continue to make an example of human beings and make it similar to God, then it would be similar to someone entering into his own dream. So he's not really there; it's only his dream. So is this how you perceive God, that he's having a big dream and then he goes in and have some fun and then he goes? Or is this what you're trying to convince us of?
Let me ask.
Acts
Let me
7.
ask.
What?
Let me ask.
Acts
Let me
17.
ask.
Here we go.
Let me ask.
Acts 17. What?
Acts 17:28, King James Version. Let me answer. And also, while you're looking it up, I want you to answer this question. Why was your prophet disobeying the Almighty Allah?
No sidebars, please. No sidebars. Let's stick to the point. We don't have time for that. You're pulling these out like we're having a joking contest. Oh, you're gonna say this? Well, I have this hadith. How about this, brother? It's a debate about a particular topic. Expand on it.
If this is a debate about a particular topic, why did he bring in all these different KJV Bibles and all this?
Because we asked you to provide a terminology that you used.
Because number one,
I'm reading it. It doesn't say anything like what you said. Matter of fact,
because number one, the King James Version has at least 5 different major revisions. We're not talking about minor things that they fixed. We're talking about major revisions. 5 major revisions. This is the most ancient one. After it comes this one.
Yep.
And then this.
Notice Kareem said I was bringing up a sidebar. The only reason why I brought up the hadith reference, because the man, when I asked him to read from the King James Version, he sarcastically said, which one? And he started saying, I'm going to show you all of these different versions. Then I said, since you want to be funny, I'm going to show you in your hadith where your prophet said that one dialect of the Quran was not enough and he disobeyed Allah. But we're going to show you that. I don't want to spoil it right now. We're going to show you that.
This one.
Yep.
And then this, which is also in Hebrew, but it's the King James.
Yep.
And the last but not least, we have the New King James.
What do you want to talk about?
I want to talk about this. Can Yahweh, quick question about Yahweh. Quick question about your God, the Trinity. Can your God, if he wanted to, really quick question for him. Can your God, brother Jacob, is it possible for him? Is it within his grasp, within his power to create a creation and not go inside of it while simultaneously protecting it and controlling the events that transpire within. Is your God unable to do that? Because mine surely is. What about your God?
Let me ask you
Your concept.
Let me ask you a question. Let me ask you this question.
How are you asking me a question when I ask you a fairly simple question?
But I'm about to answer your question
That
right now.
deals with the heart of your biggest contention with Islam.
I'm about to answer your question. When I ask you to give me an example of how creation can exist outside of consciousness in and of itself.
How in the world am I going to give you an example of that? You're asking me for something that I can't do because I'm not God. Let's answer a question that can be answered.
So he just eliminated himself from the debate. He said, you're asking me a question that I can't give because I'm not God. So basically, Kareem threw the towel in. He basically telling you in so many words that I was right. I explained my premise. I showed you reasons. I gave the verses. When I asked him to show how it is possible for God not to enter creation when creation comes from God, he just told you that he can't do it. He busted himself.
Why is it that your Yahweh cannot do the thing that my God is claiming to be able to do? Is it that my God has more capabilities than my concept? Same God, in my opinion. You can be apart from us if you want, but your creator is my creator. However, why can your concept do these things that mine can? I feel like I have one up on you.
And mine can. Why can't your God enter creation and mine can? Since yours is so great.
I'll talk about that. Let me explain that.
Sorry. The reference one more time. Acts 17 what? Acts 17?
Acts 17:28. That's right. That's right.
Acts 17.
And notice,
which doesn't say anything that you said. Matter of fact.
Acts
it says, for in him we live, move, and have our being. For in him we live, move, and have our being. Acts 17:28.
Right now,
let me go ahead and answer his question if possible.
You didn't say that earlier.
That is what I said earlier.
You heard Kenny saying I didn't say that earlier. Let's go ahead and press play. Wow. Did you hear him say I didn't say that earlier? Come on, Kenny. These guys are ridiculous, man.
No, sir, it's not.
He said center point of consciousness, all of this crazy stuff that's not there.
But you know what? I'm
not
this video on my channel anyway.
You did.
Well, put in your video, you said center point of consciousness, and you have not provided that. So that let your subscribers see that also. But let me get back to the question.
I'm about to tell you.
What are you going to tell me when I'm not asking you anything yet?
The center point of everything is God. That's the center point of everything.
We got off of that. We have already got you busted on that, all right? I'm going full Christian.
He got me busted on that. Wow, man, this is hilarious.
That's on you right now.
Where does it say? So you're just making up words. You're just making up stuff.
You didn't get me busted.
Well,
I'm just joking. I'm joking. Don't take it offensive. Let's get back to the matter at hand, the big contention here. So why is it that Yahweh seems to not be able to do this thing? And you said, why can't God enter his creation? As far as Muslims have a contention with that, and I'm gonna tell you why. The answer is when a logical person asks himself, can God stop being God? He would say no. God cannot stop being God because he is God and he will always be God. So to ask him to do something illogical would mean that he's going against the very nature of himself. He cannot stop being God. Therefore, if he becomes man, by definition, man is not God. For you to be 100% a true man, you cannot have God in you. You cannot have 40%, 80%. You're half alien. Nothing. You have to be a human being with just what a human being is defined as. So once God stops being God, because now he's a human being, then you've just done something that is illogical, that cannot happen. God to stop being God. It's like asking, can God be stupid?
Now you see, he has busted himself. He's saying a lot of gibberish. He's saying something about God being a man, goes against his nature. But he was just asking me, why can't my God do something like be outside of creation and create creation at the same time? But he just said that God not being God would go against his nature. Likewise, the very thing he asked me about God stepping outside of his creation and creation not being rooted in the consciousness of God, why can't God separate himself from creation and creation still being able to exist, which would be telling God to go against his nature, because the nature of God is that everything springs forth from the consciousness of God. Creation cannot exist without the consciousness of God. So what he was asking goes against the very nature of God himself, which is everything comes from the consciousness of God. Let's just show you the verse in the Bible. We have to show, let's show you, Acts 17:28, King James Version. For in him we live and move and have our being, as certain also of your own poets have said, for we are also his offspring. So what does that mean? We are his offspring. What was he asking me? Show me where it says that the consciousness of God is the center point. What does it say? We are his offspring. Where does the offspring comes from? The center point of what? God consciousness. What does the verse say? For in him we live and move and have our what? Our being. What does it say? For in him we live and move and have our what? Our being. We are the offspring of what? The consciousness of who? God. Thank you. And that in itself proves that the Christian concept of God and Yahweh, it makes so much more sense than the Muslim concept, because everything is energy. You can't separate life from energy, because life itself is sustained upon energy. So to separate creation from God means you have just killed creation, because creation is sustained by energy. For instance, trees and the life on this planet is sustained by the sun, the light from the sun, which causes photosynthesis, the process of photosynthesis to take place. So if you eliminate the sun, which God created to be the energy for this earth, you will thereby eliminate creation. All of the trees would die. All of the animals would die. The earth would freeze over. It would be an ice age, because we need the sun for vitamin D to live. Likewise, because the sun provides the energy. Likewise, God provides the energy for everything in the world that we live in. So if you take God outside of creation, then how can creation sustain itself? It needs God in order to sustain itself. So the stupid question he was asking me was, why can't my God create a creation to sustain itself without God being the sustainer of that creation that he created? So basically, he was asking me, why can't my God create another God that can sustain itself without God being the sustainer of the God that he created? Does that make sense? Even if God created another God, how can it be God when God is God? You can't have two gods. You can only have one origin of consciousness for everything that exists. Even if God created another God, in his dumb question that he asked me, that God would still have to inherit its consciousness from somewhere. Where would that God inherit its consciousness from? If it's not God, but was created, that means it would have inherited its consciousness from the thing that created it. And I don't want to sound too complex because I don't want to lose people, but he is pushing me to that level because of his absurd question that makes no sense. And he had to go to that extreme absurdity because he couldn't defend the absurdity of Islam saying that God does not enter creation, because it's felonious and it makes no sense. But he doesn't know that he's messing with a very deep metaphysical thinker. You take God out of creation, creation dies. Everything that has consciousness depends upon energy in order to have consciousness. So when you separate God from creation, when you take God out of creation, like the Muslims do, then creation, they are saying that creation is sustaining itself without the help of God, without having to be rooted and grounded in the consciousness of the Creator, which makes absolutely no sense. Because everything comes forth from the consciousness of God. To say anything else is absolutely absurd.
You would say no. He cannot be stupid. He has to be the all-wise, for he is God. So when God, in your definition, becomes a man, he literally becomes a circle. But he was a square. Can you have a square circle? No. It's either a square or it's either a circle. You can.
What is this dude talking about? What is this Kareem dude talking about? This dude is, wow.
Never have the both, because by definition, they are not the same. So that's my answer. Now, why can your God have a creation that he creates and then doesn't go inside of it? What is making him bound to go inside of it? Please explain that.
He said, what is making God bound to go inside of? Idiot, idiot, idiot. How many millions of times must I say that creation springs forth from the consciousness of God, is processed within the consciousness of God? Everything lives and moves and has its being within the consciousness of God. So how can God not enter what is already inside of him? It lives inside of him. It has its being inside of him. Without him being inside of it and without it being inside of him, it does not exist. Everything is rooted and grounded in the world of energy. These Muslims are so stupid. Maybe he's been bowing down and praying 5 times a day too many times and been bumping his head on the cement floor so many times that he has caused so many concussions, that he has caused brain damage to the frontal lobe of his brain, which deals with logic. That's why he can't see anything. Kareem, you are a fool. Simple as that. Everybody sees it. You're not making no sense. And the only reason why I make these videos, just to show you how stupid and the idiocy in these Muslims. They gotta be, I mean, this religion, they follow a man who convinced them that it's okay to drink camel's urine. That says it all right there. No wonder he is so ignorant and foolish and can't understand simple logic things that make so much sense.
I already told you. I read Acts 17:28, and I also want to say that in your hadith, your Allah enters creation because it says he came in a shape that they didn't know, and then he came in another shape. So did Allah create that shape or not? He was inside of the shape. Who created the shape that Allah was in when he appeared before the Muslims in one shape and then came before them in another shape? Who created that shape?
So your answer is to go to a hadith. Your answer to make things make sense.
You see that? You see how they got an answer and a rejection for everything that you say? I was just showing him how even in Islam, even though they say and claim that Allah does not enter creation, but even in Islam, Allah enters creation because there is a hadith that says that Allah appeared before the Muslims. He came in a shape, but they were afraid of the shape that he came in. So then he appeared to them again in another shape that they recognized. So my point was, Allah created the shape that he came in. Okay? So he does enter his creation because he came in a shape. And he appeared before the Muslims in a shape that he came in. And if we have enough time, I'll show you that hadith where it states exactly what I'm saying.
So in your mind, you have to use Islamic hadith.
I already read Acts 17:28.
Why does it seem that you have to go to Islam to explain your own concepts?
No, I was showing you how you are being inconsistent.
That's a whole nother subject, brother. Those types of hadith are spoken about by people who are experts in the language, experts in the mustalahat, the terminology, experts in history, experts in Arabic morphology. Brother, you are not qualified to talk about those hadith, but I'm asking you a basic question.
I'm not qualified to talk about a hadith. Who is he to say I'm not qualified? Who qualified to talk about it then? Are you qualified to talk about it? Are you a scholar? You see the extremes they have to go to try to get out of things that get them busted? If I'm not qualified to speak about it, then why do they translate it and why do they present it to the public and make it accessible to the public? If I'm not qualified to speak about it, then how can anybody be a Muslim if you can't read something for yourself in Islam and understand it for yourself? So basically, he's telling me that in order to be a Muslim, you have to listen to somebody else's word and you can't go by nothing that you think. You don't have no brains of your own. But that's exactly what he's saying. In order to be a Muslim, you have to be dumb. It's simple as that. How else can you be a Muslim if you're not dumb? Even the Quran says, don't ask questions. So he's exactly right.
Let's stay on point. Go ahead, brother.
All right, now, I answered your question. I said Acts 17:28. I said that in the hadith, your Allah said he appeared in a shape. So he created that shape, right or wrong. So that shape was his creation.
Okay, we're not going to do this. We're not going to do this. For the audience, Ben.
As you see Kenny in the background, he's putting up pictures of people with masks on. He's trying to subliminally mock me for having a mask on. But what he should be doing is putting up pictures of Muslim women with a niqab on, masking their face from the public. What he should be doing is putting up the verse in the Quran which says that Allah only speaks from behind a veil. That's what he should be doing.
Really quickly here, for the audience's benefit, when it comes to non-Muslims, what you will find is that they usually go to hadith because within the hadith tradition, if number one, there's a lot more hadiths than we have of any other kind of outside of the Quran material.
You hear him stuttering? Basically, he's trying to reject hadiths. That's the new thing in Islam today, is to reject hadiths. because hadiths get them busted. It's gotten so bad to the point where Muslims are even rejecting Sahih hadiths, which means authentic. So basically that's what he's doing. He don't want you to go to the hadith. He don't want me to go to the hadith because he knows that it's so much in a hadith that can get Islam busted. It's so many silly sayings in a hadith that a lot of Muslims called Quranists or Quran-only Muslims have already rejected the hadith. They only go by the Quran. But eventually, they're going to reject the Quran. Some Muslims have already did that. You have some splinter groups like Rashad Khalifa who rejects parts of the Quran. So that's the direction that Kareem and Kenny and them are heading in, because the more and more people like myself come out and expose Islam, they're going to be forced to reshape and reconstruct Islam. They are having to do this because more and more educated people like myself are coming out, exposing hadiths, showing the hypocrisies, showing the inconsistencies, and that's making it very hard for them.
In Islam. So what I'm saying is that the hadith tradition is vast compared to the Quran in and of itself. People don't usually want to go to the Quran because it confines. Hadith have traditions in it that are well known to be fabricated, and hadiths that are in it that are well known to be very hard upon the modern person to understand, especially when speaking about philosophy.
It's not hard to understand, Kareem. It's only hard to understand when someone is making a point that you don't want to accept and it gets you busted. Kareem, you talk too much. It's a word for a person named Kareem. It's called loquacious, which means basically being too wordy. When people, if you notice how Kareem speaks, he says a lot of stuff. And if you're not up on Islam, you would think that he is saying things of relevance. He'll talk for 10 minutes and never make a point. He'll talk for 10 straight minutes and you'll be sitting there waiting like, when is he going to say something to refute what I said? He never does it. I can talk for 2 minutes, and even though Kenny muting me, I can get out what I have to say even when they try to mute me, and you can still feel the power of what I'm saying, even though they try their best to nullify what I'm saying. That just shows how much poignant and undiluted and running around the bush my words are compared to Kenny and Kareem.
Kinds of discourses about God and different things that have to be understood with an Islamic point of view. He surely doesn't have that. So he's
just talking. He not even saying nothing. Let me fast forward past all of that. He's not even saying nothing. Just a bunch of talking just to waste time.
Okay? Carbon exists all around us.
Brother Kenny,
everything essentially comes from energy. God
Kenny,
is that energy that everything comes from. You cannot separate everything from the creation because the creation is an energy, a divine energy. The creation is a divine energy that existed.
Brothers and sisters who are watching this man right now, he has,
as you see, he mutes me again. Kenny mutes me again.
Just rambled on for a couple seconds here, but notice that all of these terminologies that he's coming up with on the spot cannot be found in his book. And we've just proved.
Liar, I showed it, found in my book, Acts 17:28. Liar, you are the only one rambling. Liar, Mr. Talk for 15 minutes but never say nothing.
And that a couple minutes ago when he mentioned that all things exist in the center of God's consciousness. These types of terminology, show me them in the...
I didn't say all things exist in the center of God's consciousness. Show me where I said that Mr. Talk for 15 minutes but never say nothing. What I said is that everything springs forth from God's consciousness, and God consciousness is the origin of everything. Thank you.
Greek. Show me any kind of indication that what you're saying is backed up by any biblical text. And even if it was, we can go into the problems with even using the Bible for this type of discourse. But, it's clear that...
And even if it was, we can go into the Bible and show how it's not even relevant for this type of discourse. So whatever you say, like I said, you can bring scriptures, you can bring verses. These Muslims are just brainwashed. These are the most, I hate to say it, but they the most stupid people ever. And that's not an insult. It's the truth. Calling it how it is. You have to be stupid to reject the truth. You have to be stupid to follow a man, a 7th century madman who convinced you to drink camel's urine. That says it all.
You're just making up your own religion at this point.
And by the
I agree.
did you know that apart from the fact of what I said, that according to his Bible, God has to come down to leave his place and come and spy on the people who were making the Tower of Babel, etc., and then he had to confuse their languages, even though the Bible says that God is not the author of confusion, but that's really a contradiction, but whatever. Let's go beyond that point. Did you know that there is a prophecy in the Bible which says that when God eventually, sometime in the future, when he will come down, the mountains...
First of all, when the Bible speaks about the Tower of Babel, God made them each speak a different language. He didn't cause confusion. He just made them not be able to communicate with each other. That's not confusion. And God came down and walked amongst Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden. He don't have to spy on anyone. God is all-seeing, unlike Allah, who is not all-seeing. So let's get that straight. There is a hadith that says that Allah does not look upon anyone who performs, and I hate to say it, but I have to say it, who performs anal sex. So how is Allah all-seeing when it says he doesn't look upon someone who performs anal sex? So busted. Trying to get me busted, you got yourself busted. You don't know our scriptures. You don't understand our Bible and what we believe in. So don't try to tell us what we believe in when we know more about your own religion than you do. And we show hadiths that you are afraid to show. Like the hadith that I read that Kenny kept muting me. He will never bring that out in front of his public because he don't want people to know that hadith even exists. They want to hide it because they are ashamed of certain things that their prophet said and did.
Will melt under his feet. They will melt under his feet, and the valleys will split. This tells us that...
Let's fast forward past all of that gibberish. Let's get to the...
Go ahead.
Okay. I didn't hear most of what he said because it was cracking up and everything. Now,
what a coincidence.
I was under the assumption that now it was my turn to ask a question. So can I get my turn to ask a question?
Yeah, why not?
Can I get my turn to ask a question?
With him, yes, why not?
Sure. Your answer up. Go ahead.
Kareem.
Yes, sir.
Kareem, can I ask you a question? I'm not yelling.
Yes, absolutely.
I'm not yelling. Kenny, don't mute me. I'm not yelling. Kareem.
Now, this is the part where he really get busted. Y'all pay attention to this. They really about to get busted at this point, and Kenny is really about to start muting me at this point right here. Eventually, he's going to kick me off the show. Just watch this part. This is very good.
I ask you a question.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Do you trust every word of Allah? Yes or no?
Define what do you mean by this?
ask you again. Do you trust every word of Allah? Yes or no?
To be honest, I'm not understanding the question. Clarify it for me.
Well, okay, I'll ask it to you again. Since he seems not to understand a simple question. Do you trust?
I'm asking him a simple question. Do he trust the words of Allah? He's afraid of the things that come out of my mouth. He don't know what I'm going to say next, so he's playing stupid and playing dumb.
Every word of the Quran, which is the words of Allah.
Allahumma na'am. Yes.
Okay, now, I have a hadith right here in front of me where your prophet did not trust the words of Allah. He said,
You see Kenny brushing his his beard. You see the dude with the headphones. You see the signs of the nervousness. You gotta peep body language. The dude with the headphones, you see him rubbing his face. That's a sign of nervousness. He frustrated. That's a sign of, this guy about to get us busted. They nervous because they don't know what I'm about to say next.
Against Allah. And I'm going to read it.
Before you read, let me clarify something. You're going to read a hadith now, audience, to the audience. Just as a precursor. Audience, he's going to read now a hadith that Muslims have been reading before him for 1400 years, have never came to the conclusions that he is now going to state, but he's telling us he's now going to read a clear hadith where our prophet didn't trust the words of God. I'm sure it's going to be another hadith we've all read, and we don't come to that conclusion, but he will come to a conclusion. And let's go ahead and hear it then. Yes.
I mean, it's so far-fetched to even make such a proclamation. Because obviously, if the Prophet, peace be upon him, didn't trust the words of Allah, then 1.8 billion Muslims in the world today wouldn't trust.
You see how they muted me? They afraid. They afraid. Simple as that. All the words that Kareem said, I can translate it in one word: afraid.
The words of Allah. We see evidence that. Okay. What's this?
No, Brother Kenny, and before you do that, the thing is this: the same.
All right, you see me? I put the coward sign up. Kenny booted me out the show, but I came back in the show. I'm gonna fast forward to that part.
Hadith he's gonna read is gonna come in a book of hadith that is asserting that Islam is the truth. But he's going to say it to us now as though there's a heading under this hadith that says the prophet didn't trust the words of, as though there's someone before him.
Blah, 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 blah. Let's show you what it says. Let's fast forward to the part.
I'm reading from my head. Yet the King James Version has grave defects. By the middle of the 19th, I cannot imagine a Muslim doing a better job for the Quran. Let's be fair. Replying, Ziyad.
I'm sorry, brother.
Or just call me Abu Huraira. It's easier.
Brother Ziyad. Okay, so that'll be the last time I'll make the mistake on that.
That's okay.
I thought you taught it a while ago, but I was looking in the chat. Anyway,
check your Facebook.
Yeah, I know. Okay, brother Ziyad, I'm so sorry.
Sorry, that's why I wasn't replying. I thought you were talking to someone else. I'm sorry about that. Yeah.
Brother, I'm so sorry.
No, it's okay. No need to apologize.
Okay, so you've issued him a challenge on 4 topics. You want to repeat those to him, and then we'll see if he wants to bite on that, and if not,
okay. Let me repeat the topics. Is the Bible the perfect, unchanged, unaltered Word of God?
It has nothing to do with the black stone.
Nothing to do with the black stone. These are the 4 topics that I challenge them on. Is Jesus God, and did he claim to be God?
It has nothing to do with the black stone.
Exactly. Was Jesus, peace be upon him, truly crucified?
It has nothing to do with the black stone.
Is Prophet Muhammad ﷺ still mentioned in the nowadays Bible?
Nothing to do with the black stone.
Nothing to do with the black stone. I'm not gonna get into historical debates.
Yeah.
and one quote from this book. Anyone recognize this book?
It's one of many. Unmute yourself. Unmute yourself.
All right. I don't mind debating the guy with the headphones.
The guy.
Can you hear me?
Beholder.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
I'm unmuted. I don't mind debating the guy with the headphones. Now, I have to be allowed. And in the debate, I want to ask him a question because something y'all said earlier about a Kaaba being in heaven and that angels will circumambulating the Kaaba in heaven. I want to touch on that in our debate as well. I want to talk about that black stone that's in the corner of the Kaaba.
He sounds like he's ordering at a restaurant.
See how they muted me again?
Now, here is, the preface to this. The preface to this was, this Bible was compiled by 32 scholars of the highest eminence, backed by 50 cooperating denominations. So, and in the preface, it mentions the King James Bible, and it says some beautiful words about the Bible, about the King James Bible. That, it's the music of the cadences, its beautiful rhythm, the literature, etc., etc. And it tells you these beautiful words about the King James Bible. These words are very encouraging. They're very good. I mean, as Sheikh Ahmed did.
Bunch of gibberish, not making a point or anything. Let's fast forward past that part.
Your Quran says that it was Allah who passed down the words, and if Allah's words.
Now, this is the point where I'm going to come in. He was talking about the Bible, and I was telling you all earlier that when the Muslims talk about the Bible being corrupted, you don't try to defend what they said. You just go to the Quran to get them busted. So let's rewind back a little.
If you want to use that stance, you can apply that to the Quran. Making all those claims about the King James Bible, what I have to say is that's the easiest one of all. I'm talking, man. I sat quietly for 5 minutes straight. Everybody was bearing witness.
Well, he didn't make the claim.
I sat quiet for 5 minutes.
He didn't make the claim about the King James Bible. The King James Bible made the claims about the King James Bible.
The RSP.
Everybody.
RSP. Right.
Maybe you sitting quietly. I sat quietly. Can I respond without being interrupted?
Fair enough. I'm sorry.
Fair enough. Okay. Now, that's one of the easiest ones of all, because only thing I got to do when that time comes for the debate, I can go straight to your Quran and show you where it says that Allah is the one who sent down what we have. Also, if you want to use that stance, you can apply that to the Quran, because the Quran said that it was made into shreds. So the Quran even admits it was corrupted. So if you want to go that route, I got plenty of information on that. Your own Quran said it was made into shreds. In the use of Ali translation, I got plenty of documentation on that. And your Quran says that it was Allah who passed down the words. And if Allah's words are the same in the Bible, if that's his word and Allah's word can't be changed, then you the one that's going to have to say, then why didn't Allah defend one of his words from being corrupted, but kept another one of his words being corrupted? Is one of Allah's words greater than the other?
Okay, let's quite simply, yes, one is greater than the other, far greater than the other.
You hear what Kareem? You hear what Kenny just admitted? You hear what I said? Now, everybody heard what I said? the guy with the headphones, like I was telling you earlier, don't try to sit and defend the Bible and say, oh, the Bible is not corrupted. You go to what this scholar said and what this scholar said. You go to the Quran. The Quran is what says that Allah sent down what we have. And the Quran says that Allah's words cannot be changed. So if Allah is the one responsible for sending down the Injil and the Torah, what we have, then how can Allah be all powerful if he allowed the words that he sent down to be corrupted and changed? Because again, it says that Allah sent down the Injil, which is the gospel, and the Torah, which is the Old Testament that we have. Okay? Now, I asked Kenny, I asked the man with the headphones, I said, are you saying that one of Allah's words is greater than another one of Allah's words? Kenny said, yes, it is. But how does that make sense? If Allah's words are without flaw, meaning they are perfection, how can one perfection out-perfect another perfection if it is the words of Allah? Both of them are the words of Allah, but he said, yes, one of Allah's words is greater than another one of his words, but it's all the words of Allah. And if Allah's words are perfect and perfectly powerful and perfectly great and perfectly magnificent, how can one be less greater than another one of Allah's words? So what Kenny just admitted, without even knowing it, since Allah's words is one of his attributes, he just admitted that one of Allah's attributes is weaker than another one of his attributes. He just got his own God busted and didn't even realize what he was doing. By him saying what he said, trying to get me busted, trying to convince me that he had more knowledge than me, he just said that one of Allah's attributes, which is the Bible he sent down, according to the Quran, because that would still qualify as one of the words of Allah, one of the attributes of Allah. Kenny has admitted that one of the attributes of Allah was corrupted, meaning he is admitting that one of the words of Allah is not all powerful and it was corrupted, but at the same time, it's an attribute of Allah. Busted. So keep talking, Kenny. Keep destroying your own self. Keep right on talking. And yes, the Quran says that it was made into shreds. Yes, the Quran said it was made into shreds. As a matter of fact, let's show you that. Let's show you Quran made into shreds. We got Yusuf Ali. You see it? Surah 1591. You see? As have made Quran into shreds as they please. Shakir, those who made the Quran into shreds. Busted. So when it says that the Quran was made into shreds, that means the Quran has been corrupted. It has been misinterpreted, mistranslated, but that's the word of Allah. And what do they always say about the Bible? They say that the Bible has been corrupted. But nowhere in the Bible, nowhere in the Quran does it say that the Bible has been corrupted. David Wood put out a challenge for any Muslim to show and prove that the Quran unequivocally says that the Bible has been corrupted. No Muslim was able to do it. Now, the verse that I showed you, Surah 1591, if the Quran was to say that about the Bible, you wouldn't hear the last of it from Kenny and Kareem and Mustafa and that guy with the headphones. They would be pointing to that verse with the quickness. They would say, see, right here in Surah 1591, it says that the Bible was made into shreds. But when it say it about the Quran, they don't even mention it. They never bring that verse up. It takes somebody like me to bring it up. If it would have said the same thing about the Bible, they would say, you see right here, the Quran says the Bible was made into shreds. But when it says the same thing about the Quran, they don't bring it up. They make an excuse for it, or they'll just not even talk about it altogether. Man, we getting them so busted in this video. But let's continue.
Because the Bible, for one, never claims to be the words of Allah. Its words are written according to men, 60 anonymous authors. Okay, so Muslims don't make the claim. We don't have to support and try to defend the Bible. 66, right?
40 authors. 40.
Him saying that the Bible has more than one author really validates the validity of the Bible. And I'm going to tell you why. Because whenever you have a story where you have more than one person corroborating with the story, that gives the story more validity. It makes the story more trustworthy. For example, the Gospels. You have 4 accounts from 4 different disciples about the life of Jesus. But when it comes to the Quran, everything that the Muslim believes in, it's all coming from one source, which is Muhammad. The night journey is coming from Muhammad. The incident in the cave of Hira is coming from Muhammad. Everything is substantiated by one man. So how do you know that man was not lying or not? You don't have that problem with the Bible. With the Bible, you have corroborating evidence, corroborating witnesses to strengthen your story. You have prophets of old prophesying about events that take place and come to pass. You have the disciples testifying things and corroborating with each other and things tying in together. You have the Old Testament prophets, words that fall in sync with the words that Jesus spoke in the New Testament. But it's not like that with Islam. With Islam, the Muslims have to depend upon Muhammad for everything. When they say the Shahada, they have to include the name of Muhammad. They say that Muhammad is the best example of all mankind. So everything they believe in, it falls on the words of Muhammad. If Muhammad said, Allah said something, they got to trust that Muhammad is not lying to them. We don't have that problem with the Bible because we have many eyewitnesses and different stories and different accounts that all back up each other. But when it comes to the Quran, they have to depend upon the testimony of one person named Muhammad.
40 authors, out of which at least 35 are unknown. At least.
Yeah. No, 60 authors, right? 60. Like that.
That's pretty good. That's pretty good. That's acceptable. Yes.
You get on my nerves. I can't help it. You bug me. You annoy me. You aggravate me.
Yeah.
Your comments.
And I'll give him my word. When he posts about what we've talked about tonight, he's only been here for a while. I mean, an hour, maybe more. He's done longer videos. I personally challenge him. Post this whole thing from the time you came until now. Do not fast forward. Let people hear it. If you do that, and I find that on your channel, I will personally ask the brother next time you come.
Another far greater than the other, because the Bible, for one, never claims to be the words of Allah. Its words are written according to men, 60 anonymous authors.
since you were saying that, I'm going to also show the part, and I'm going to ask this question right now, and I'm going to give Kenny an opportunity to redeem himself for the
interrupt you. No one whatsoever. Okay, that's a different scenario. So, Brother Kareem, what stipulation did you put on him?
Now watch this. Now we about to bring this video to an end. I'm about to get them busted good once and for all. So.
Well, I'm just asking him. I think that it would be an amazing thing if he can, because as we do, we're not going to chop this session up. We're not going to erase some of what he said. Whatever he said it, and that's how it will go up. So we asked him that if he wants to do a commentary on what we've said, fine. But let the whole thing play out. Let everyone get to say exactly what we said today. And I think that would just be a fair and I think it would be nice a gesture for us, and I will definitely reciprocate it next time you come by all means.
Okay, I appreciate that. And for the record, since you were saying that, I'm going to also show the part, and I'm going to ask this question right now, and I'm going to give Kenny an opportunity to redeem himself for the record, because I know the show is about to end. Now, a little while back, I was wanting to read a hadith when I had asked Kareem the question about, does he trust the word of Allah? Now, for the record, everybody's going to see that Kenny is not going to allow me to read it because he is afraid. Now I'll ask Kareem. Kareem, do you have any fear?
I don't want you to read it because I'm tired of hearing your big mouth, plain and simple.
See how he cut me off? He don't want me to read it because he's afraid. His excuse is he's tired of hearing my big mouth. I agreed with Kareem that I would show the parts when he spoke, like I did through this video. I only fast forward past the parts where the guy with the headphones was speaking, some of his parts, and some of the parts where Mustafa was speaking, because it was just a bunch of gibberish. And I only fast forward the parts where some of the part of Kareem when he was just doing gibberish and not making any points. So I presented Kareem's arguments and I presented my arguments. Now, as you see, Kenny, being afraid, being the coward that he is, he muted me when I asked him, could I read the hadith that we're going to show you anyway, that he didn't want me to read on his show, because it would have gotten his prophet busted and he wouldn't have been able to redeem his prophet from the embarrassment.
I need to go to my salat.
We can't argue with that. We can't argue with that.
I'm tired of hearing your big mouth. Plain and simple. I'm not afraid of you. I'm not afraid of Kareem's response or not being able to respond to you. I'm more than confident that the brother can respond to you quite effectively, as a matter of fact. Okay, so what you're doing is you're digging yourself in a deeper hole as far as this show goes. And as far as I'm concerned, you're burying yourself for any opportunity to ever come back.
You can't hear what I'm saying, but what I'm saying while I'm muted, when I'm pointing at the screen, I'm saying, you are afraid. You are afraid. It was hilarious.
And so let's clarify that, because I don't like you. And I don't have no problem telling you that I don't like you. Why don't I like you? Because you're not a likable person. Okay? I'm not as patient as the brother is. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forgive me. But I don't like dealing with you. Maybe I should put it like that.
That's pretty good. That's pretty good.
Also, I forgot to tell you something. And I'm going to leave the link to this show so you can see it in its the full show. I'll leave it in the description box. Also, on this very show, Kenny said something that I forgot to say. He said that because he was trying to make an excuse against so-called Islamophobes, saying that Islam is a violent religion. And he quoted some quote that Gandhi supposedly said, because you can't, Muslims are always putting words in people's mouth. That's a whole nother subject. So supposedly, allegedly, Gandhi said something about Muhammad, that Muhammad was this great person and he was a peaceful person. So before Kenny had said that, he said Gandhi was one of the most peaceful persons to ever live. So before I even came on to the panel, I had wrote in the chat that Kenny just busted himself, because if he was saying that Gandhi was one of the most peaceful persons to ever live, then he just busted himself and Islam and his prophet and everything, because the claim that they make is that Islam is the religion of peace. But Gandhi, not being a Muslim, if he was one of the most peaceful people to ever live, like Kenny has said, then why do we need Islam if we can obtain peace by being a Hindu, like he said, Gandhi was one of the most peaceful people to ever live. And Gandhi was a Hindu. He's a Hindu. He's not a Muslim. So Kenny just, basically, if he was trying to promote Islam, he did it a disservice by saying that Gandhi was one of the most peaceful people to ever live without being a Muslim. So thank you, Kenny, for letting us know that you don't need Islam to be one of the most peaceful persons to ever live. You don't need Islam, the peaceful religion, the religion of peace. You just proved to us that there are other religions of peace without Islam being a religion of peace. And don't lie and say you didn't say it, because it's on the video. Everybody going to go back and see it and watch it. You busted yourself. Thought I would put that in there because it was funny, but let's continue.
That's acceptable, yes.
You get on my nerves. I can't help it. You bug me. You annoy me. You aggravate me.
Yeah.
Your comments to be totally.
Yeah, I know I aggravated you. Like they say, the truth hurts. The truth was getting on your nerves. That's the only thing that was getting on your nerves, Kenny.
Totally absurd and irrational. You're yelling the whole time. I can't stand it. Plain and simple.
Well, even parents don't like their children at certain times. That doesn't mean you have a innate hatred towards him. You're trying to tell him that he really gets under your skin with the shenanigans, but it's possible he may come.
You see me pointing the camera to the hadith I was wanting to read, that they didn't allow me to read?
Allah warns us in the Quran about engaging people like this. He says, do not sit with those, I'm paraphrasing, do not sit with those who are mocking the verses of the Quran, lest you become hypocrites like them. Because in the process...
Too late for that, Kenny. You already sat and talked with me. Too late for that. That's too late to say that verse. So if you was thinking that I'm mocking your verses and you're not supposed to sit with me, too late for that. You've already went against your Quran then. Too late, Kenny. Busted yourself again.
He's aggravating me, right? And then maybe I'll act out of character, and now I'm sitting along with him as just looking like a big dummy, because this big dummy has come along and made me look like a big dummy. And so I'm not saying he's a big dummy. I'm just using that as a.
No, Kenny, you don't look like a big dummy. You look like an albino rat. That's what you actually look like.
Example. So we have to be patient. All those things. He tests my patience quite simply. If I never interact with you again, I have no problem with that, to be quite honest. So if you can come here and be a gentleman, lower your voice, act decently. You don't really need the mask. I've seen what you look like earlier. As a matter of fact, I have it recorded. Alhamdulillah. So your face is not a big secret. You were on for probably about 15, maybe 20 minutes earlier, and you didn't have your mask on.
And guess what, Brother Kenny? And guess what? Nothing in the world different will happen to him, because Muslims are not worried about you, Brother Devin. We do not care whether you come with your mask or not. Look at us. We're here. We're fine. We're going to be fine tomorrow, inshallah. And you will be also.
I've always shown my face.
Yeah. No one's sneaking up on you. No one's in the closet. No one's hiding around the corner in the darkness, shadows of the night. No one's coming to get you.
Right. It reminds me of what I've heard before. Something you can remind people of. So
let me fast forward. So there you have it. And now let's show you the hadith during the ending of the around the ending of the video, when the guy with the headphones, he pulled out the 5 versions of the Bible, so-called, that he had, trying to get me embarrassed or busted. And then I was like, I wanted to read something from the hadith. Kenny wouldn't allow me to do it. As you see, he booted me off of his channel. So this is the hadith that I was going to read to them. Okay. Ubay b. Ka'b reported that the messenger of Allah was near the tank of Banu Gifar, that Gabriel came to him and said, Allah has commanded you to recite to your people the Quran in one dialect. Upon this he said, I ask from Allah pardon and forgiveness. So this is Muhammad speaking now. My people are not capable of doing it. He then came for the second time and said, Gabriel having to come for the second time, Allah commanded Muhammad to recite to his people the Quran in one dialect. Allah is supposed to be all-knowing. He's supposed to know everything. Muhammad's supposed to be the servant of Allah. He's supposed to trust the words of Allah. That's why I asked Kareem, did he trust the words of Allah? He hesitated to answer me, as you saw in the video. So here is the Prophet of Islam, their best example, giving them an example of how not to trust the words of Allah, as you see. So here, let's start over from the top. Allah has commanded you to recite to your people the Quran in one dialect. Upon this he said, I ask from Allah pardon and forgiveness. My people are not capable of doing it. He then came for the second time and said, Allah has commanded you that you should recite the Quran to your people in two dialects. Upon this, Muhammad again said, I seek pardon and forgiveness from Allah. My people would not be able to do so. He, Gabriel, came for the third time and said, Allah has commanded you to recite the Quran to your people in three dialects. Upon this, he said, I ask pardon and forgiveness from Allah. My people would not be able to do it. He then came to him for the fourth time and said, Allah has commanded you to recite the Quran to your people in 7 dialects, and in whichever dialect they would recite, they would be right. So as you see, it took Allah 4 different times before to command Muhammad to do a thing, before Muhammad finally obliged to the command of Allah. He repeatedly disrespected his God, and his God did not reprimand him. So in this hadith, what you see is an example of Allah placating to the desires and the feelings of Muhammad. Also, you see in this hadith, Allah being demonstrated as not having more knowledge about a situation than Muhammad. So when we say that Muhammad is the God of the Muslims, this hadith proves it better than anything I can say. This hadith demonstrates it to the utmost. You have Muhammad telling Allah what to do, basically telling Allah, no, I don't trust your judgment. So whose people is it? You see? Because Muhammad said, my people are not capable of doing it. You see where it says that? When Allah commanded him the first time to recite the Quran in one dialect, Muhammad told Allah, my people are not capable of doing it. So basically, Muhammad is saying that these are his people. But I thought that Allah was the creator of these people. Muhammad saying these are my people. But who created those people, Muhammad? Did Allah create those people that you are saying my people? Or did Allah create those people? Who has the right to say what the people can do or what they can't do? Allah or Muhammad? Who knows those people better than the creator who created those people? Does Allah know those people and what they are capable of doing and what they are not capable of doing better than Muhammad? Or do Muhammad know what those people are capable of doing or not capable of doing? Who has the most knowledge about those people? That's the question. Obviously, Muhammad does, because Allah changed his word to accommodate the knowledge that Muhammad had. Allah didn't go by his knowledge. So obviously, Allah is not all-knowing. And not only that, it shows that Allah doesn't depend on his knowledge that he has. He allows his creation's knowledge to supersede the knowledge that he has. So Allah doesn't even depend upon or trust his own knowledge. If he is all-knowing, then why did Allah allow Muhammad to question his knowledge? So it's showing you that Muhammad is really the God of Islam. He is correcting his God. He is telling his God basically that his God is wrong. And here's another thing. He is pointing out, he's letting you know that he is wrong for what he is doing. Because if Muhammad didn't feel like he was wrong for questioning the command of Allah, he wouldn't ask for forgiveness. He realized that he sinned against his God. But his God allowed it to happen. Not one time, not two times, not three times, but it took 4 times for Muhammad to finally be convinced that he could trust the words of his God. Now, the question to the Muslims is this: if Muhammad is the best example that there has ever been for mankind, should we take this example of Muhammad in this hadith and apply it to the Quran? Because the Quran is the words of Allah, which was sent by Jibril, just like in his hadith. The command was given, Jibril sent the message, just like in the situation with the Quran. Jibril sent the message to Muhammad. Now, if Muhammad is the greatest example, then is it okay for Muslims to say to Allah that he could have wrote the Quran better? He could have made this verse better because my people, just like Muhammad said, won't be able to get the Quran, Allah, in the version that you sent it in. So Allah, you got to revise your words and tell Jibril to bring it back down to us again. That's exactly what Muhammad did in this hadith. This is the example of Islam that these Muslims are telling us to follow. They are telling us to follow a God whose words, whose first command is not good enough. So it takes him 4 times, 4 commands So the question is to the Muslims, what happened to the first command? Did it disappear into thin air? What happened to the second command? What happened to the third command? What happened to the fourth command? So the question to the Muslims is this. Would you Muslims be able to recite the Quran in one dialect like Allah first commanded? If Allah knows best, would you have been able to recite the Quran in one dialect since Allah knows best? Answer that question. Since Allah knows best, would you have been able to recite the Quran to your people in two dialects since Allah knows best? It continues. Since Allah knows best and commanded that you recite the Quran in three dialects, would you as Muslims be able to recite the Quran in three dialects since Allah knows best? Or did Muhammad know best and you are only capable of reciting the Quran in 7 dialects? And the history behind this whole hadith is simple. Muhammad kept forgetting the Quran, and he had to make up something because he kept forgetting the Quran, and people kept calling him out about it. And this is why he came up with this story, because every time he forget, he can say, oh, well, that dialect is correct as well. And that version is correct as well. And that version is correct as well. That's the history behind this hadith. But it only shows that Allah is not to be trusted. The words of Allah are not good enough. His first command is not good enough. But what do Muslims always say? They say, Allah the only thing he has to say is be, and it is. That's what they say. That's what they tell us. But right here, when Allah says be and commands something, it's not good enough. And that's why Kenny and Kareem and the rest of them on that panel, now you see why they did not want me to read this hadith. Imagine if I would have read this hadith on their panel. Imagine how confounded they would have been. Imagine how Mustafa would have been shouting all over the place, blurting all over what I'm saying. Imagine Kareem talking for 10 minutes straight, not saying anything. Imagine Kenny. They wouldn't know what to say. So they had no choice but to mute me, because they can't afford for something like this to be read on Kenny Bomer's panel, because this will destroy what they are trying to promote, that Allah knows best, that Muhammad is the servant of Allah, because this hadith shows you the very opposite of everything that they claim. Like Allah is all knowing and we should trust his words. This hadith gets all of that busted. So that's why they didn't want me to read it. That's why every time I spoke, they got afraid. Because Kenny knows that every time I open my mouth, that I'm going to say something that gets Islam destroyed. And he never knows what I'm about to say. And that's why he be so nervous the entire time when I'm on his panel. So with that, I would like to end this show, and like to thank everybody for watching. And basically, I just wanted to show you how it's so easy to refute Muslims. It's nothing to be afraid about. Nothing they say is worth anything. As you saw me do, we just ripped them apart from like the old people used to say, from rooter to the tutor. We ripped them apart. We left them with nothing. We ripped them to shreds, just like the Quran says that it has been ripped to shreds. That's exactly what we did to them on this panel. And I just thank God that He allowed me to be used as a vessel to destroy Islam, because I'm out here to destroy lies. That's what I do. That's my profession. I'm in the business of getting Islam busted, and any lies for that matter. So with that, I'd like to leave you with God bless each and every one of you, and stay tuned to the channel because we have so much more coming up. And hit the likes button, hit the subscribe button if you haven't already subscribed, and feel free to share these videos. Feel free to post these videos on your channel. Spread this information, because on this channel we have like some of the best arguments against Islam on YouTube. So with that, this is Brother Jacob signing out.